Pat gazed gloomily at her wedding photograph. Dennis was smiling. He was in his formal suit, a boutonniere of lilies of the valley adorning his lapel. She stood beside him, her face uncertain, timidly grasping the hem of her white dress. Apple trees in bloom surrounded them, their petals strewn across the ground. "Yes," Pat said aloud, biting her lip. "My mother perhaps was right. She said I was naive, a young fool. Back then everything seemed so perfect. And Dennis, there was no one better in the whole world. But now—" Pat stepped away from the dresser, brushing a tear from her lashes. It had been over a month since her husband's confession. "It was unbelievably cruel to tell me about his affair on our anniversary. 12 years of marriage wasted. At least we didn't have children. That's a blessing, I suppose." Pat couldn't imagine having to explain to a child why their parents were divorcing. Maybe things would have been different with a child, she mused. No. She reconsidered after a few seconds. A child wouldn't have helped. It might have hastened the collapse, like with Holly. Her husband left when their daughter was only 4, and now he doesn't even pay alimony. Holly works 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, and they once had such an amazing love. Apparently, feelings don't withstand the test of time. But what about those couples happily married for 50 years? True love? Don't be ridiculous. There's no such thing. Long-lasting marriages are more likely built on mutual respect and friendship. These feelings are much stronger than so-called love. I did love Dennis. Truly. It's pointless to deny that. I felt it from him too. But when did it all fade away? I didn't even notice. It just became routine. Even when he confessed to being in love with another woman for 2 years, I wasn't surprised. Deep down I'd sensed it, though I'd pushed my suspicions aside. Well, there's nothing I can do now. Let him live as he wants. I'll manage without him. But I doubt it's all about love. It's about money. Dennis is not young anymore, and he's no Adonis. I found him attractive, of course. However, he was 35 when I fell for him, and I was only 20. He was successful, earning good money. My mum kept warning me to be careful, but I didn't care about the money. His intellect and world-view won me over. I've always been drawn to men like that. Now he's 50, and I can't fathom what a young woman, she can't be more than 25, sees in him besides money and status. She should be with someone her own age, building a life. These foolish girls don't realize what they're getting into, lured by the promise of wealth. And we're not even talking about great riches here. Yes, Dennis has money, but he also has a lot of debt. His firm has accumulated so many unprofitable projects, investments and loans. It only appears that he's doing well. The girl obviously hasn't seen the state of his accounts. She probably fell for the expensive car, the suit, the real estate. He must be deceiving her too. Well, enough of this. I need a walk. My head is pounding. Pat quickly put on jeans and a t-shirt, tied her hair in a ponytail, and stepped out into the warm June afternoon. The main street bustled with traffic, a cacophony of engine roars and honking horns. Summer was in full swing, with ice cream stands dotting the sidewalks. Pat decided to treat herself, and bought a cold treat. She bit into it with relish, and memories of her childhood flooded back, of walks through the city centre with her mother, both of them enjoying ice cream. Of course the flavour wasn't quite the same, but she enjoyed it nonetheless. Pat hadn't eaten ice cream in ages. Dennis wasn't a fan, and she rarely indulged herself, preferring to maintain a healthy diet. She didn't have much of a sweet tooth either, but this ice cream was delightful. As she finished her treat, she heard someone call her name. Pat turned, scanning the crowd. Her eyes fell on a slender young woman in a red tracksuit, holding a small, shaggy dog. Pat froze. "I never thought I'd run into you here." The girl smiled wryly. Her dog yapped as if in agreement. "Hush, Marcel." "Hello, Jenny." Why the surprise? I live nearby. It's natural I'd take a walk here. Well, I thought it was a work day. You're always so busy. I'm on vacation, Pat replied indifferently to her husband's mistress. Do you live around here too? It's strange how calmly you're reacting to me. It's good, I suppose. I don't want to cause trouble. But still, the situation is so... Jenny, the situation is quite ordinary. A husband leaves his wife for a younger mistress after years of marriage. It's a common occurrence. I thought you'd try to scratch my eyes out, said the girl. I've never seen a woman react so calmly to a rival. And you're accustomed to such situations? No, I'm just saying. In soap operas it's all intrigue, scandals and revenge. Jenny, life isn't a soap opera. It's both simpler and more complicated. I respect Dennis, regardless of his actions. It's his choice, his right. I'll grant him the divorce, don't worry. But don't think life with him will be easy. He's a complex man. Though, if you have love... What, you think I don't? Jenny laughed, stroking Marcel. To be honest, I think it's all about money. But that's not my concern. Don't try to convince me of your pure feelings. I've seen enough in my life to know one thing for certain. When a girl is half a man's age, there's rarely any sincerity involved. Dennis isn't that old. It's perfectly normal that we find each other interesting. Do you think I'd be better off with men my age? They're all immature and afraid of commitment. So you want a family? Of course I want a baby. I'm practicing my mothering skills with Marcel, but you wouldn't understand. You don't have children. Yes, Pat agreed. I can't understand. And about money, continued Jenny, I believe a man should be well-to-do, regardless of his feelings. He should confirm his love through actions. In your time, romance was the main thing. Love conquers all. Wasn't that the saying? But now it's different. It's quite natural for a woman to expect not only romance from her beloved, but also financial support. A girl, especially one like me, shouldn't have to work, and it costs a lot to maintain such beauty. Just think about the price of a manicure, or a beautician. Yes, indeed. Pat smiled grimly, eyeing the girl's flawlessly smooth face, her sculpted lips, and thick eyelashes, clearly not of natural origin. You'd do better to tend to your soul rather than your body, Jenny. The body will eventually wear out, but the soul stays with you forever. Youth may seem eternal now, but believe me, no beautician can restore the sparkle in your eyes. What do I care about sparkle? Jenny laughed. Diamonds shine brighter than eyes ever could, and they're quite enough. And if you think Dennis and I aren't serious, you're mistaken. By the way, he bought me a house as a gift. I'm on my way to the notary right now to sign the papers. Pat froze in surprise. Dennis had always been rather stingy. Throughout their entire life together, he had given her very little. She had bought her own jewellery. Even for a car she had saved up for herself. Dennis only contributed when the need for his wife to have a car became pressing, and she openly asked for money. All his property was registered to the company to reduce taxes, so the news of him buying a house for his mistress shocked Pat to the core. "Is that so?" she muttered. "Well, congratulations. Will you live there together?" "Of course. This apartment where you live now, Dennis will sell after the divorce, so prepare for a lonely old age. Alone with your soul." Jenny laughed in Pat's face. Pat felt herself boiling over. She was ready to forgive her husband for his infidelity, even for spending so lavishly on his mistress. But that laughter threw her off balance. A lonely old age was not in her plans at all. Moreover, she had hoped for Dennis's decency, that he would leave the apartment to her after the divorce. She had invested a lot of time and effort in arranging this living space, yet her husband had bought the apartment before their wedding, and legally she couldn't claim it. But morally, especially for Dennis, it wouldn't have cost him anything. Her husband had always been decent, and Pat didn't expect such a trick. Calming herself with the thought that the mistress was just mocking her, Pat said a curt goodbye and went home. She couldn't wait to talk to Dennis, but he was rarely at home now, preferring to live in the country. Apparently it was their country house, built last fall, that he had given to his mistress, although maybe the house was originally intended for Jenny. Pat had long discouraged her husband from building, but he insisted that a country house was a good asset. As usual, the man had formalized everything through his company. Pat hadn't involved herself in her husband's financial affairs, unwisely, as it turned out. Realizing it was pointless to wait for Dennis, she decided to visit him herself, especially since Jenny was in town and unlikely to cross paths with her at the house. Without wasting time, Pat jumped into her SUV and sped towards the highway. The settlement where Dennis had built the house was a short drive away. The trendy suburb that had replaced the once shabby village greeted her with a wrought iron gate and a guard booth. The guard glanced at Pat, checked something on his computer, and opened the gate. Thank God Dennis hasn't thought to remove me from the list of residents yet, Pat mused to herself. What a scoundrel. Or am I worrying too soon? Jenny could be telling lies just to spite me. She's been watching too many soap operas. What's with these girls nowadays? All they think about is money. Anyway, her time will come. She'll realize money isn't everything. Pat slowly drove up to the high fence surrounding the beautiful mansion. She pressed a button on her key fob, and the gate slid open smoothly. Pat drove into the yard, where she immediately spotted her husband's black sedan. Dennis was home. The woman climbed the porch and stepped inside. "Dennis!" she called out. An echo rumbled through the walls. The house was practically empty, with only some furniture on the first floor. Dennis had kept wanting to hire a designer, but had continually put it off. Now Pat could guess why. Apparently, Jenny was in charge here, not wanting anyone near her future nest. "Jenny, why are you back so early?" came her husband's voice, and then he appeared. "Oh, Pat, is that you?" The man looked very surprised and clearly unhappy with the sudden appearance of his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Not expecting me?" Pat smirked. "No," muttered the husband. "Dennis, we need to talk. I don't know if you are coming home tonight, so I decided to visit you myself." "Well," the man sighed, "come in. What's the matter? Did you bring the divorce papers?" "No, that's your job. I'll sign everything. There's no problem with that, but anyway, I met your Jenny today." "Jenny?" Her husband didn't let her finish. "Where, I wonder?" "Not far from our apartment. She was on her way to the notary." "Ah, I see." "Dennis, is it true you gave her this house?" Dennis pressed his lips tightly together and said nothing for a long time. "Yes," he finally exhaled. "I didn't want to tell you to avoid too many questions, but since it's out, don't get the wrong idea, I haven't lost my head. It's just that things aren't going well at the firm, so I quickly transferred the property to Jenny. Otherwise, I'd lose the house if it stayed registered to the firm or to me. You know I have debts." "I know about the debts," Pat nodded. "Does your mistress know?" "It's none of my business, but she's acting too materialistic. Don't be fooled, Dennis. And she also told me that you're going to sell our apartment. Is that true?" Dennis averted his eyes. "Why are you silent? Is it true or not? You can't do that. This is our home. My whole life is connected with it. I've put my heart into every corner." "Pat, calm down. We'll have to sell the apartment. You know you're not legally entitled to it anyway. I bought it before we were married." "Don't make a scene now. If you're worried about where you're going to live—" "I have a place to live," objected the wife. "That's not the point. Don't you understand?" "All the more reason to let it go. The court won't side with you in any case. Don't be dramatic. I really need the money now. Pat, I'm in trouble, and selling the apartment will solve a lot. Show some compassion." "What? Are you kidding me?" Pat laughed bitterly. "Compassion? Me? You're literally kicking me out on the street, and I'm the one lacking compassion. Let me guess. You're also claiming half of my car?" "Well, not half," Dennis grimly grinned, "but a quarter. That's precisely how much I put into it." "How petty you are. You'll get nothing from me. I bought the car with my own money. You didn't even contribute a quarter of the sum. What a fool I am. I believed all your fairy tales so you could bypass the tax authorities. Did you prepare for everything in advance? Why did you marry me in the first place?" "Pat, stop it." "As you wish." The woman jumped up from the couch. "If that's the case, I'll file the divorce papers myself today. What's the hold-up? Choke on your houses, apartments, cars. I hope this girl won't take away the miserable crumbs that are still left. I loved you, Dennis. That's gone. But I also respected you. Alas, now you've done everything possible to shatter that respect with your mercenary interests. Goodbye. I'll pack my things today and bring the key to your apartment to your office. I'll leave it with the girls at reception, and don't ever call me again. Everything has come and gone. It's not worth remembering." Pat stormed towards the exit and slammed the door loudly. She wanted to destroy everything so that Jenny would have to clean it up later. But the door was strong, unlike Pat's own nerves. The phone rang in the morning. Pat peeled one eye open to figure out where her smartphone was. The sound came from somewhere in the closet. "Oh, damn," she swore. "I left it in my bag like an idiot. Who's calling? I'm on vacation. They won't even let me sleep now." The phone kept ringing, and Pat realized that the person on the other end clearly didn't intend to give up. She'd have to get up. She lazily stomped over to the hallway and pulled the phone out of her bag. "Hello?" the woman answered sleepily. "Hello," came a male voice. "May I speak with Pat Crawford?" I'm Pat Buzzington," the woman struggled. "Crawford is my maiden name. I'm listening." "I apologize. That's what the papers say. My name is Mr. Littlefield. I'm a lawyer. Could you come to my office today?" "Is this about the divorce?" The woman sighed deeply, even a little relieved that Dennis had worked so quickly. "Divorce?" Mr. Littlefield sounded puzzled. "No, I represent the interests of Aaron Ross. Do you know this man?" Pat was confused. "To be honest, no. No, definitely not." "He was a client of mine. The fact is that he passed away 6 months ago, and now I need to disclose his will to his heirs. You're listed as the sole heir. We only just found your phone number." "Me? There must be some mistake." Pat frowned. "I have no relatives by that name." "Well, it's not necessarily a fact that he was your relative. Maybe just an acquaintance. People sometimes leave inheritances to non-relatives. In any case, there can be no mistake. There's also a photo of you as a child attached here. Perhaps you'd like to come and find out in person." "Okay." Pat continued to frown. "What time and where?" Mr. Littlefield gave his address and scheduled a meeting for 1 p.m. Pat hung up the phone and looked at her watch. It was nearly 11. "Wow, I really slept in," she said aloud. "And I thought it was so early to call. Turns out lunch is just around the corner." She hastily brewed an instant coffee that was miraculously on the shelf, ate a sandwich and took a shower. It wasn't a long drive, and Pat didn't bother to dress up, but when she pulled up to the lawyer's office she regretted it. She was met by an impeccably groomed secretary, whose suit alone cost more than Pat's monthly salary. "Mr. Littlefield is waiting for you," the young woman sang out. Pat was now struck by how courteously she was treated. It was clear that the law firm was doing well. The office sparkled with polished marble, expensive furniture was everywhere, and exotic plants stood in exquisite pots. The secretary escorted the visitor to her boss's office. Peter turned out to be a well-fed man of advanced age, his eyes glittering vividly from behind his designer glasses. "Mr. Littlefield, I still think there's some mistake. I'm not the person you're looking for." "We'll sort it out." The lawyer sat down at the table and began shuffling through some papers. "Here, please, is this you in the photo?" Pat took the proffered photo. Her heart immediately fluttered. An identical photo was kept at home. This picture captured a girl in a beautiful silk dress adorned with butterflies, elegant bows in her hair, and a huge piece of apple in her mouth, visible through her cheek. The bitten apple itself was firmly clutched in her right hand, pressed tightly against the hem of her dress. "It's me," Pat exclaimed, flustered. "Definitely me. There's an identical picture at home, but I'm sorry, I don't know the deceased at all." "Are you sure? Let me show you his photo too." The lawyer turned to his folder again and extracted 2 glossy sheets. One photo, fairly recent, showed an elderly man with snow-white hair and wiry legs, mooring some kind of vessel. Pat nearly recoiled when she took the second picture. It depicted the same man, but about 25 years younger, appearing to be in his 50s. Though the woman didn't recognize him, the resemblance to herself was immediately apparent. She had never looked like her mother, and had never seen her father before. She'd always been told he died somewhere in the northern ice. Until she was 10, she believed it. But then she understood the truth. There was no polar explorer daddy, only an unhappy love and an abandoned pregnant woman. "Looks like you, doesn't it?" The lawyer squinted. "You know, I won't beat around the bush. This is Mr. Ross, your father." "That's impossible. My father died over 30 years ago, and his name was Paul." "Are you certain? Is that what your mother told you? By the way, I think if you show her this picture, her expression will change immediately. You see, I was Mr. Ross's attorney. We worked together for years, and he confided many things to me. Besides, there's also a letter for his daughter, Pat, here, in which he wrote everything to you himself." "A letter? But I still don't understand. I didn't believe Mum's polar explorer story, but I thought Dad had simply abandoned us. And he had a picture of me when I was 4 years old? So my mother must have given it to him somehow." "Your father was a good man, and he didn't abandon you. By the way, your mother didn't lie about the polar expedition. He did frequently travel to polar regions. He was a geologist, working with gas and oil. Then he disappeared for a long time. It so happened that at that very moment your mother discovered she was pregnant. She told Aaron and expected him back in a month, but the weather turned treacherous. The expedition was trapped in ice for months, with no communication whatsoever. They were even presumed dead after locals stumbled upon traces of an abandoned camp with evidence of bear activity. 3 bodies were found. The rest were reported missing. I suppose that's the information given to your mother. She either moved away or left everything behind. Aaron was unaware of this. When he finally returned, no one was waiting at his old address. No information, nothing at all. His fiancée had vanished. Then, a few years later, he received a letter at his old address. By that time, Aaron no longer lived there, but he hadn't sold the apartment, hoping Brenda, your mother, would get in touch. His hope wasn't misplaced. The envelope contained a photo of a little girl and a note. "I don't know if you're alive, Aaron. How long I waited and believed. How often I knocked on your door. Silence. I guess you're no longer in this world. I'm being foolish writing to a dead man, but I don't know how else to tell you that you have a daughter. Her name is Pat. She's 4 now, learning to read. She's intelligent just like you, and she looks just like you." There was nothing else. The envelope was completely blank. No return address or even a hint of the sender. Aaron made every effort to find her, but Brenda had vanished without a trace. He later discovered that Brenda had changed her name and given it to her daughter. God only knows why. Perhaps she simply wanted to forget the past. "She never told you?" "No. I always thought Crawford was our surname from my grandmother. Mum mentioned something about her and grandfather having a big fight, and she gave up her surname. We followed to support her. But I might be confusing things. I don't remember well. I was just a little girl." "I see." The lawyer nodded. "But how did my father find me?" "He found you about 4 years ago. He hired a private investigator, an ex-cop, essentially a detective. He uncovered everything. Then something in him wavered and he got scared. Can you imagine? All those years of hoping, finally finding you, and then giving up." "What was he afraid of?" "Think about it. You're a grown woman, married, well-to-do. You've never heard of him. And then, out of the blue, your father shows up." "What's the big deal?" Pat exclaimed. "What difference does it make how many years it's been? It wasn't his fault things happened this way." "Pat, we're all different. What's easy for you might be worse than death for someone else. Aaron was very anxious. He prepared to meet you many times but kept postponing. He wanted to see Brenda too. He even watched her from afar and wanted to see her through me, but he always backed out at the last moment. Don't judge him." "Mr. Littlefield, honestly, I'm shocked. What did he die of?" "Heart failure. Quite ordinary. Although he kept himself fit until the end. He loved yachting. It was his passion. He wrote his will when he found out about you. His personal life never quite worked out. He was a one-woman man. There were women, of course, but nothing serious. It was the money that attracted them." "Was he rich?" Pat asked, confused. "Quite well off by today's standards. He worked in the oil and gas industry as a highly skilled specialist. Later he got into securities when he retired. You'll see for yourself. Shall we proceed to the reading of the will?" "Wait," Pat interrupted. "Can I refuse anything?" "The money? Are you worried your father was in debt?" "No, not at all. I'm just afraid to even find out what's in it. And it's not my thing. To be honest, it sounds a bit absurd, like being in a movie, an inheritance, a missing father." "You're free to do as you wish. I'm obliged to fulfill the deceased's last will and inform you of his decision. If you refuse, the money will go to charity. But I still think you should accept it all. Aaron hoped for almost 30 years that he'd meet his daughter one day. From the moment he took that picture from his mailbox, he was working only for you. Pat, believe me, I know what I'm talking about. He wasn't just my client, but a close friend." "Well," Pat hesitated. "Okay, read it then." The lawyer summoned his assistants and opened the will envelope in front of everyone. "Mum, are you home?" Pat called out, opening the door of her old apartment. "Why didn't you lock it again? How many times do I have to tell you?" "Oh, daughter," Brenda exclaimed, trying to wipe her hands on her apron. "Don't scold me. I forgot. You're just in time. I'm making a casserole. You could have at least warned me." "Mum, we need to have a serious talk. I think you should sit down." "What is it? What's wrong?" Brenda perched on the edge of the couch, folding her hands in her lap and fidgeting with her apron. "I've just come from my lawyer." "Do you want to talk about divorce? Just give it up. Let your Dennis live as he likes. He ruined your whole life.
and you still haven't given me grandchildren. I told you to marry only for great love, and if you don't have it, don't rush into anything."
"Mum, it's not about divorce. By the way, did you love my father?"
"Father?"
"Yes, my father, the polar explorer." The mother pressed her lips together and looked intently at her daughter.
"Do you think if I hadn't loved him, I would have suffered all these years alone? Well, I wasn't alone with you, but—"
Pat pulled out a picture of Aaron Ross from her bag and held it out to her mother. Brenda stared at it, bewildered.
"Where did you get this?"
she asked, her voice trembling as she reached for the photo. Brenda gently took the picture, and Pat saw tears welling up in her mother's eyes. "Mum, is that really my father?"
"Daughter,"
was all the woman could say before bursting into tears. Pat comforted her crying mother for a long time, made her tea, and when Brenda regained her composure, told her everything she had learned from the lawyer. "Mum, there's also a letter, but I haven't read it yet. I'm afraid. Shall we read it together?"
"It turns out that Aaron has been alive all these years. Read it, daughter. Read it quickly."
Pat took out a white envelope on which was written in beautiful handwriting, "To my daughter, Pat." She opened the letter and began to read aloud. "Hello, my dear daughter. By the time you read these lines, I may no longer be alive. I sense this because I realize I lack the strength and courage to meet you. For years, I've tried unsuccessfully to find you. Fate was finally kind, and a few years ago I managed to locate you. But something inside me held me back from simply approaching you and saying, 'Hello, daughter. I'm your daddy.' I know I'll blame myself for this indecision for the rest of my life, but life isn't as simple as it seems. Your mum and I once loved each other deeply and eagerly awaited the arrival of our wonderful baby. But there's a saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. That's how it turned out for me. Over 30 years ago, I often travelled to the north for work, and one expedition proved fatal. We were caught in a terrible storm. Several people died, and the survivors were cut off from civilization for many months. Our group was presumed missing. I later learned that relatives were told not to get their hopes up. Apparently, your mum was devastated and left home. I searched for her for a long time, but in vain. It's easy to find someone now, but times were different then. I started trying again when I found your picture in my mailbox. I don't understand why Brenda did that. She could have at least asked the neighbours. Not many people knew I was back, but they knew each other. I understand you and your mum moved to another city for a long time and returned after you got married. A private detective I hired to find you explained this to me later. Daughter, I can't turn back time, and I feel I'll never be able to speak with you. Don't judge me too harshly. I'm such a weak and sentimental man now, though all my life I've been tough, with strong principles, hardened by the northern winds. I don't know what's happening to me. I can't even explain it to myself. I was afraid, after that Brenda had fallen out of love with me, that she had found someone else. If I'd only known she was still waiting for me. But fear and doubt are the culprits. Never be afraid of anything, my daughter, and don't doubt. Then everything will be fine. I've lived a long life, and believe me, I know what I'm talking about. I've never been afraid of anything, but as I've gotten older, I've given up. My health is failing, and the constant loneliness takes its toll. I've worked hard and amassed a decent fortune. If you accept part of what I have, I'll be the happiest man alive. Don't take this money as an attempt to buy you off. No, all this time I've been working with the hope that one day I'll hold you in my arms.
and make up for your suffering. I have a weak heart. The years have taken their toll. I don't know how much longer I can go on, but I feel it won't be much longer. If I never dare to speak to you, you'll receive this letter after I'm gone. I love you, my daughter, with all my ailing heart, and I have never forgotten your mother. You were and are the two most important treasures in my life. I hope that what remains after me will give you the opportunity to find happiness. Your dad. Both women fell silent. In the ensuing quiet, only the ticking of the wall clock was distinctly audible. And I thought it was all a lie. Pat broke the silence. About the polar explorers, about dying in the ice. No, my daughter, it's all true, her mother whispered. God, what a fool I was. I believed that colonel. What colonel? Pat asked, alarmed. Yes, Paul. You don't remember him. We broke up before you were 2 years old. He came to tell me that Aaron was dead. He said there was no hope. At first he just brought groceries, then he started taking care of me. Don't think we never had anything. When I was 8 months pregnant, he offered me to move in. When you were born, he officially recognized you as his daughter. But I couldn't live with that man. You weren't even 2 years old when I went back to my mother. Now I realize that Aaron was already looking for us. But he didn't find us and gave up. He didn't know my mother. She lived in another city and was against it, so I didn't introduce them. It seems I could have just asked our neighbours. But when I left with Paul, I didn't say anything to anyone. I just wanted to forget about my first love and start anew. Besides, Paul brought me an official paper stating that Aaron Ross was officially recognised as dead. You think he fooled you? Pat frowned. I didn't think so then. Now I realise he could have done such a thing. I believed him implicitly. He's an officer after all. Paul tried every way to win me over, offered to marry me, but I was afraid or intuitively felt that Aaron was alive or something else. I can't explain. We had a big fight once. I remember he grabbed you out of your crib and I went crazy, beating him with my fists, screaming. In the morning I packed my things when he left for work and went to my mother's. I haven't seen him since. Why did you put my picture in the mailbox for my father? When this picture was taken and I looked at it, I was so sad. You reminded me very much of Aaron in that picture. The same sly look, as if you were up to something. And your eyes, I don't remember what came over me, but I put the photo in an envelope and came to his house, secretly from my mother. I told her I had to inquire about a job, that there was an interesting opportunity. I took the train and left. I walked around Aaron's house for a long time. Then finally I went to the entrance, rang the doorbell. Of course no one answered. So I threw the envelope in the mailbox. I knew no one would see it, but I thought I was doing the right thing. As you can see, he got your letter. Mummy, why didn't you ask any of the neighbours? The lawyer said my father came back to check on the apartment sometimes, but he never sold it. He kept hoping you'd come. I don't know. Yes, dear, I acted like a fool, but what am I going to do now? There's nothing you can do now, Mummy. He has already died. But I was glad to know that he hadn't forgotten us. I've lived all these years believing that you were deceiving me, for my own good, of course, but I still thought that my dad had left you pregnant, and that you and grandmother had made all this fairy tale about the expedition to keep me from asking unnecessary questions. Come on, my girl. How could I deceive you? I didn't tell you much about your father because it was painful for me. Why didn't he come to me? Okay, he was ashamed in front of you, but I would have accepted him. I loved him all my life. All my life. Is there such a thing as lifelong love? Pat thought. Or does Mum say so because she avoided the fate of being buried under the weight of domestic problems? She must have romanticized the image of my father so that she believes in love. Yes, I suppose so.
Daughter, Brenda interrupted her thoughts. Did he leave you anything? I'm not asking for personal gain, I'm just curious. He writes about it, and you went to the lawyer to listen to the will. It'd be great if he left you his old apartment. I'd love to go there one more time. There was such a balcony there. We used to stand on it and kiss all the time, and the neighbour, Mrs. Hale, used to scold and shame us, calling us shameless. So many memories of that place. Well, he's probably sold it by now, so I don't even dream of being there again. No, Mum, Pat grinned. He didn't. There will be an opportunity for your memories to take the plunge, except that I don't know whether to inherit or not. Still, of course you should, and don't think I'm so worried about the money. It's just that you could use the apartment now. I understand that Dennis is going to leave you nothing. You said he's already got his hands on everything with his girlfriend. At least you'll have a place to live. No, you can always stay at my place. It's your home too, but you need to build your life further. It will be uncomfortable with your mother at your side. That's true, Mum, but it's not just an apartment. Not only? Brenda wondered. Yes, Pat nodded. Dad left everything he had. And there's a lot there, Mum. Too much. Here, take a look. She held out the will to her mother. Brenda read it carefully, and with every second her eyebrows crept higher and higher. Is it true? She said at last. Erin was so rich. And what about the yachts? The lawyer said my father was passionate about sailing. He has 2 boats. He even went on a round-the-world trip on one of them. Wow, Brenda shook her head. Who would have thought it? Pat, it's a fortune. Are you sure it's all true? Yes, I didn't believe it myself, but Mr. Littlefield showed me all the documents. There can be no mistake. If I inherit, it'll all be mine. But I don't know what to do with such wealth. Daughter, where is he buried? I'd like to visit his grave. Mr. Littlefield said the body was cremated and the urn with the ashes placed at the local cemetery. We'll definitely go, but for now, I need to process all of this. Pat and her mother talked for a long time. Brenda reminisced about the past, occasionally crying and hugging her daughter. That evening, Pat decided to stay at her mother's house, rather than return to the empty apartment where her marriage had ended. Soon, Pat moved into her father's old apartment. Everything seemed unfamiliar and strange to her. Antique furniture, stuffed northern animals, collections of minerals, old photographs. In one photo, she saw her smiling mother in Erin's arms. She gazed at the picture for a long time, reluctant to change anything. Brenda visited several times, immersing herself in memories. She often stood on the balcony where Pat had created a cosy spot with a small table and wicker chair. Pat had moved all her belongings here but hadn't told Dennis about the apartment, the inheritance, or her father's discovery. He didn't need to know. Now she waited only for the scheduled court hearing. The divorce was set for the following week. Before then, Pat wanted to visit the harbour town to see one of her father's yachts. Though she knew little about yachts and planned to sell them, she wanted to experience the ship firsthand, to touch the ropes her father had knotted, to grasp the helm. The yacht maintenance was prepaid for several years, but Pat didn't want them to sit idle. The town welcomed her with warm, damp August air. She didn't need to rent accommodations. Her father owned an apartment, now hers. Pat entered the dark foyer and climbed the wide steps to the second floor. Behind a grand door, she found a spacious apartment with high, intricately stuccoed ceilings. She marvelled at how much her father had preserved.
The massive furniture wasn't replicas, but carefully restored antiques. A French chiming clock adorned the wall, and an enormous crystal chandelier hung in the living room. Pat whistled, surveying her new possessions. Why did father need all this? Was it an investment? After resting briefly, she headed to the port to meet Louis. They'd arranged for him to show her the yacht and discuss further plans. Louis, slightly over 30, was tall, with an impressive athletic build. Yet his smile was kind and open, complemented by wide, childlike grey eyes framed by black lashes. Those eyelashes, Pat thought, returning Louis's firm handshake. Any woman would be envious. He's quite handsome, clearly toughened by sea air and physical exertion. Louis, he introduced himself. I dislike formalities, so I'd appreciate it if we use first names. Certainly, Pat laughed. You can call me Pat. Louis led Pat along the pier, past a row of moored yachts. It was her first time seeing ships up close. In pictures they seemed small, but here they loomed like behemoths. She shared this observation with Louis. He grinned. You should see ocean yachts. They'd make you dizzy. They're like floating apartment buildings. The most interesting thing is that they seem huge from the outside, but they're even bigger on deck. You'll see for yourself. Here we are. Louis stopped near two yachts. One had blue stripes on its hull, the other maroon. Meet the fleet, Pat. That beauty with the blue stripe is Pat, your namesake, and her neighbour is Brenda. Really? Pat marvelled. I see Dad was a romantic, naming his boats after Mum and me. Oh, really? He never told me. I asked him more than once why he gave these beauties such names. He said they just sounded beautiful. By the way, I didn't even know he had a wife and daughter. He always came alone and kept quiet about his family. Do you live in another town? I won't keep it to myself, Louis, Pat sighed. I only found out I had a father 2 months ago. Unfortunately, I didn't even have an opportunity to meet him. His lawyer called me to the announcement of the will. For my mum and me, it was a real shock. And now I own all this property. I know Dad was very attached to his yachts, but I'm far from the world and would like to sell them so that they don't rust in the harbour. Surely there must be people who are interested, right? Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't mind buying one myself. Many people have been after Mr. Ross's boats. They're his lucky charms. Not only did he personally supervise every step of construction at the shipyard, but he won more than one regatta on them. I'm so sad I didn't get to know my father personally. He was a remarkable man, if the stories about him are true. Not a doubt about it. Mr. Ross was a man with a capital M, and did a lot for those in need. He didn't hoard money like a miser. He always said that everyone is rewarded for their deeds, and strived to help people. By the way, he introduced me to sailing. I was just a kid then, only 15 years old. He was the one who invited me to join his crew. In 20 years I became a captain. Not of a pirate ship, of course, or a military ship, but still. You mean you're a real captain? Marvelled Pat. Yes, Louis winked. If you like, I can show you. How about a little excursion? We can sail on the bay now. How does that sound? With pleasure. Pat's eyes widened. I've only sailed on a yacht once, in Phuket, but it was more of a speedboat than a yacht, and without sails. Well, we'll go on Brenda. She's smaller, so we don't need to assemble a crew. Yes, Captain, Pat called out. Louis helped her aboard and busied himself with preparations for the voyage. The ride was splendid. The wind was strong enough and the ship sailed briskly, overcoming the light waves. Pat caught the wind on her face and watched the sun's glare reflect off the water. Louis stood near the helm, the very picture of an exemplary captain from a romance novel. Now you see why your father was so passionate about this sport, Louis smiled. You bet, Pat marvelled. One trip was enough to make me want more. So maybe you won't sell the yachts? You can afford not to work now and do whatever you want. I think Mr. Ross would be pleased to know his daughter had followed in his footsteps. Well, Pat mused, it's one thing to have fun, another to have a hobby. I haven't thought about what I'm going to do yet. To be honest, I wouldn't want to lead an idle life. My husband made good money, but that didn't motivate me to quit my job at all. So it turns out you're married? Louis looked a bit crestfallen. And here I was, head in the clouds. I was right. There was no way such a great woman could be single. Thanks for the compliment, Pat laughed, but I'm already a single woman. I'm finalizing my divorce next week. Really? Louis was surprised. How come? Is your husband out of his mind? To let a woman like you go? Maybe he is, Pat chuckled. He's been having an affair for a long time. He confessed on our anniversary. What a jerk! Louis shook his head. I don't understand some men. Here he has a wife. Beautiful, intelligent, interesting. What more could he want? Did you torment him or something? You don't seem like you'd be cruel or spiteful. He found a younger woman. It's such a cliché. A man in his mid-50s, bored with his wife, and a 20-year-old girl on the horizon. He chased after her like a dog with a piece of meat. Younger? Well, how old are you? I wouldn't give you more than 27. It's impolite to ask a woman her age, but... I'll be 33 soon, Pat said. Well, anyway, I've let it go. At least my husband confessed everything honestly, even if he didn't do it in the nicest way. We have no jointly acquired property. He registered everything under a company to pay fewer taxes. And now I've found out he gave his mistress our house. Can you imagine? The one we built together. And he's basically throwing me out on the street. But I don't really care right now. Dad left me so much, I could live in a different place every month. Does your husband know about the inheritance? No, he's greedy for money. He'll think of some other trick. I'm afraid he'll sue for half of it. Why would he do that? An inheritance isn't considered joint acquired property. Don't worry about it. Really? I was worried about that. Why didn't you ask your lawyer? I didn't even think about it. Typical. Women worry about nothing and don't bother to check the facts. Okay, I won't criticize you. Why don't we grab a bite to eat? There's a great pizza place nearby. Their panini are delicious. My treat. I'd love to, Pat smiled. But let's make it my treat. We'll celebrate my inheritance and remember my dad. Well, if that's what you want. It just doesn't seem very gentlemanly. While they were driving to the pizzeria, Pat asked, Louis, would you like to buy the yacht? Seriously, I don't need it, and at least it would be in safe hands. Are you kidding? I can't afford one of those. I've got a much smaller boat, and it costs me a fortune. I'm an ordinary IT guy. I've been saving up for a boat for 5 years. Mr. Ross's yacht is a dream for people like me. But I can help to find a buyer. Is it really that expensive? Pat looked at Louis. Pat, sailing is an activity either for the rich or the obsessed. I fall into the second category. I like to live my dreams. How about if I rent it to you? You could sell your boat and choose between Brenda and Pat. You can sail as much as you want. Louis frowned. Rent, you say? That option suits me better if the price isn't too high. You decide how much you can afford to pay. You can just take care of her. I understand you're not a man who'll take anything for nothing, but I think your looking after the boat would be payment enough. If you're not joking, I'm all for it, Louis smiled. By the way, here we are. A week later, Pat drove up to the courthouse in a sleek sports car she had found in her father's country house garage. There were several cars there that she had never even dreamed of owning. She loved cars, even the one she had saved up for herself. She chose cautiously, trying to consider everything. Powerful cars were the ultimate luxury. Dennis drove a prestigious German business-class sedan and very rarely allowed Pat to drive. That's when she felt elated, enjoying the roar of the engine and the realization that all this luxurious power was entirely in her hands. And now it was a dream come true. Pat didn't need all these cars, but would be quite satisfied to drive each of them once and then choose the best one. Now the woman silently slammed the door of the bright yellow Italian sports car and proudly headed for the entrance. Going up to the second floor where the courtroom was located, Pat saw Dennis and Jenny standing at the window, animatedly discussing something. "Hi," Pat said to them, smiling cheerfully. "It's been a while." "You look happy," Dennis said, embarrassed. "What? Can't wait to set the record straight." "Me?" Pat grinned wryly. Judging by Jenny's face, she's the eager one. "Why are you without a dog?" Pat squinted. "Not allowed? Or don't you want her to see such a spectacle?" "Pat, are you drunk or what?" Dennis was indignant. "I'm just laughing at how serious you look. You should be happy. Everyone will get what they want today." "What kind of car is that?" Dennis asked shyly. "We saw you drive up in a yellow car." "This," Pat smiled, "is mine now. But you don't even have to count on half of it going to you. To each his own, Dennis. You took everything from me, or rather, you didn't want to share. Did you think I'd be trying to make ends meet till my old age? Well, I'm not. Guys, sometimes life has its surprises." "Everyone please report to the courtroom," came the voice of the court clerk before Pat could continue. "Shall we?" She waved her hand. 40 minutes later, it was over. Pat rushed out of the room, not wanting any more contact with her ex-husband and his girlfriend. But Dennis caught up with her. "Tell me, where did you get that car? I didn't like how calmly you reacted when the judge said that after the divorce you have nothing left." "Dennis, why do you care now?" "We're strangers from now on." "Oh, tell me, what's the harm?" Jenny, who had caught up with them, wrinkled her face. "I'm curious too. That car is top class. You must have rented it to amaze us. What a stupid idea." "Shall I take you for a ride?" "Sorry, I can't. There's only 2 seats. But you're wrong. I inherited it. And there are many more like it. I've got yachts and houses and a decent bank account." "Ah, now I see. You are really drunk," laughed Dennis. "From which rich uncle did you inherit?" "You don't believe me, but I don't care. We have nothing in common now, and I won't give you the details. By the way, Jenny," Pat looked intently at her rival, "you're together for great love, so it shouldn't be scary for you. I mean, Dennis's debts. Your chosen one, Jenny, isn't such a wealthy man. The car, the house, the suit, the watch, it's all just a sham, a pitiful remnant. Ask him how much his firm owes to creditors. By the way, Dennis, when you get the information on my inheritance, and you will, I know you will, don't come crying to me for money. From now on, forget I exist and don't try to meet me. Do you understand? Everyone makes their own choices and is responsible for the consequences." Saying this, Pat turned sharply on her heels and sprinted down the stairs. She drove her bright yellow car down the highway, her heart pounding frantically, but not from euphoria. She felt an inexpressible sense of freedom, a freedom she had never thought of or even dreamed of. Love, to hell with this love, thought the woman. You should love yourself first. After all, you are the most valuable thing in life. Why give up on yourself for others? Of course, there are parents and children, but that love is entirely different, unconditional. There's love for friends, nature, delicious food, It's not the same. Love is cosmos, integrity, harmony. As long as you don't have all this within you, the world will be cracking at the seams, throwing one unpleasant surprise after another. And there's no point dreaming about beautiful princes who pile up bouquets at first, then leave you drowning in dirty socks and eternal reproaches. What then? Be alone? Buddhists believe a whole person won't be lost in loneliness, but it's boring to live like that. Although, now I have money, I can afford anything, even travel the whole world. With Dennis, we only went to standard resorts. I'll go to Africa. There are so many countries, each with a different culture. Maybe Lou is right about trying sailing. The sea will help take my mind off all these worldly and petty thoughts. What's keeping me here? Mum? No, she'll be happy if I'm not at home. I could always invite her, but she won't go. She's a homebody. OK, next, work. Well, that's debatable. What am I going to do in the design bureau? I'm sick of it, and my vacation is ruined with this divorce. That's it. I'm quitting. I'll return to the office and immediately write my resignation letter. Pat did just that. In September, she decided to go to the sea town again. She didn't tell Louis anything in advance. She wanted to surprise him. She arrived at the port early in the morning, straight from the airport. It was quite chilly, and the woman was shivering in her cashmere coat. She reached her father's yachts. There was hardly anyone on the dock. She dialed Louis's number, but he didn't answer. What a fool. Why did I come? Thought Pat. OK, I'll wait for him on the boat. Maybe he'll show up. Pat boarded the Brenda and went down into the hold. The flight had taken its toll. The woman lay down on the bunk and fell asleep almost immediately. She awoke to someone shaking her by the shoulder. She muttered, unhappily trying to open her eyes. In front of her stood a smiling Louis. I thought a vagrant had gotten in and was running the place, the man laughed. Pat, how did you end up here? I called you, but you didn't answer, and then I fell asleep. That's not what I mean. What brings you here, in town? Louis, I got divorced and fired, and now I want to start a new life, said the woman, rising from her bunk. Just like that? All at once? Louis was surprised. So what have you decided? I thought maybe you're right, and it's worth learning to sail a yacht. Where would I start? Well, laughed the man, it's not that simple. You've got to learn. For how long? It depends on how lucky you are. Generally, at the school itself, it takes about a year to acquire primary skills. Though there's theory, navigation. Automation simplifies a lot, of course, but you need to know the basics. You can decide for yourself, but I can teach you in parallel. Practice, so to speak. I agree. Pat's eyes sparkled. Can we start right now? You're so quick, Louis winked at her. But we can't go out to sea today. The weather's not so good. But I can show you how everything is organised here, and then we'll go to the yachtsman's school, where you can sign up for training. Great! Pat clapped her hands. For the next few hours, Louis showed her around the yacht, explaining what everything was and how it was used. He demonstrated how to tie nautical knots, explained the operation of the helm and the use of the sails, and showed her how the instruments worked. Pat remained enthralled. Well, it's a little more complicated on Pat. The yacht itself is bigger, and you'll need a crew of 3 or 4 to sail it. I like Brenda. Pat looked away. I can sail it alone, can't I? Is it all right that I'm a woman? It's great, Louis reassured her. We have a girl in our club who's only 15, and she's already won a round-the-world regatta on her 30-metre yacht. Really? Pat's eyes widened. We have many women. It only seems hard and difficult at first glance. If you have willpower, a craving for the sea and a desire to live, you're welcome. Anyway, I need to go to a place now. I didn't intend to be in the harbour late, and I came here accidentally. Yeah, let's go. Louis put her in his car and they drove for a long time. When they reached the necessary address, the man pulled up and said, Pat, listen, I didn't tell you. You can wait for me in the car, of course, but you can come upstairs with me. I've got a daughter up there. I promised I'd be there today. A daughter? Exclaimed the woman in surprise. Oh, don't think anything of the sort. She's all grown up. She's almost 17. She's in high school. Her mother, Thelma, and I got married right after high school. Back then it seemed like love was real, forever and all that. Thelma got pregnant almost right away and gave birth at 18. That's when we realized that not everything was so rosy in our little world. I was studying at the college then, had to work part-time reinstalling systems on computers. Money was catastrophically lacking. And Thelma sat at home with Brooke, didn't work, didn't go anywhere to study after school. So I did the best I could. My parents helped, of course. Thelma's grandmother lived here. She sheltered us then, and after she died, her granddaughter got the apartment. They live here together, and our marriage fell apart after 3 years. Thelma found another man, and we parted, without scolding and scandals. I understood that she wanted a better life, which I couldn't give her. I only set one condition, that she wouldn't prevent me from communicating with Brooke. She lived with that man for a while, then they split up. She's still trying to make a life for herself. I help them, of course. My daughter doesn't need anything. But Thelma, she's still a dear person. I can't leave her. I realize that she's wrong, but she's still my child's mother. Do you and Brooke have a good relationship? How does she feel about me? Oh, Brooke is a something. I've never really left her life. She keeps me informed about her life, as I do with her. It's a very trusting relationship. She doesn't feel the same way about her mother as she does about me, but she doesn't want to live with me. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and she's a teenage girl. She visits, but more often I'm there. Would you like to come upstairs with me and meet her? Oh, would that be convenient? Pat asked, feeling embarrassed. Why not? My ex-wife isn't here right now. She's away with another suitor somewhere on the seas. Brooke is home alone. Well, all right, though I'm a little shy. Pat and Louis went up to the 3rd floor of an old house. Louis rang the bell. There was a cheerful trill, followed by tinkling footsteps, as if a jolly elephant was slapping its wet feet on the parquet. The door swung open. "Daddy!" squealed a girl with blue hair and a freckled face. "Oh, you're not alone. It's Pat, isn't it?" I recognized her right away. Pat was taken aback, not expecting such a reaction. "Hi, Pat, I'm Brooke. I'm overjoyed to meet you. Daddy has told me so much about you." "Hi, Brooke," Pat replied, embarrassed. She immediately looked at Louis, wondering what he could have told about her. "Yes, he told me everything. Dad is like an open book. Come in." "Hasn't Mum come back yet?" Louis asked his daughter. "No, she hasn't. She's going to be hanging out with her Abdullah, or whatever his name is, for at least another week. I'm really confused." "Brooke, stop talking about your mother like that," Louis said in a low voice. "You girls go into the living room, and I'll make us some tea," the man suggested, and immediately slipped out of the room, leaving Pat with his daughter. That's the way he always is. He blushes and doesn't want his embarrassment seen, while I'm telling it like it is, Brooke solemnly proclaimed. "Well, come on, tell me. Do you have children? A husband?" "No husband and no children. I got divorced recently, and now I'm trying to start a new life. I would like to learn how to sail a yacht." "Oh, you're in the right place. Daddy will teach you in no time. He even taught me a little, but I'm not really interested. Pat, I'm sorry I'm being so familiar with you. I don't know how else to be, but I'll tell you one thing. I can see right through my dad. and I can see that he likes you. I just don't want him to be disappointed. He's not having any luck in his love life. He's such a great guy, though." "I don't even know," Pat said thoughtfully. "I really like him as a person, but we've only known each other for a little while. I don't even think he has any feelings for me." "He has, and what a feeling! I haven't seen such burning eyes in a long time." "Really?" Pat was surprised and felt herself beginning to blush. The girl's words had touched something in her soul. "Think carefully. Do you really need this? You're a well-to-do lady and can do whatever you want. But don't play with my daddy. He's very sensitive, even though he looks tough. If you don't feel anything for him, you'd better let him know right away, so he doesn't build castles in the air." "Okay," Pat nodded. "I'll tell you in confidence, Dad hasn't been with a woman in 4 years. I don't know how he manages, but he's getting by. He's not the kind of man to just spend the night and run away. He's a romantic. He believes in love. He thinks that there's only one person for life. Although he thought the same about Mum. But their love boat crashed on the rocks of everyday life, and they were very young when they got married. Imagine if I got married now. How long would it last? A year? I want to taste life, not lock myself at home with a husband and diapers. I'll think about it when I'm 30. You have to take such steps consciously, even if the love is strong." "Wow. Usually at your age, girls dream of princes." "They dream about money. Almost all my classmates are obsessed with it. They're convinced that a man should support and take care of them. In fact, they just don't want to work. They'd be better off developing their minds. There are only a handful of sensible ones. The guys are no better, though there are more reasonable ones among them." "The cult of money is forceful, I agree." Pat nodded. "I'm glad you have such a mature outlook. How can such a young girl have so much wisdom?" "I read many books. I'm interested in everything, and I'm watching my mother methodically ruin her life with different suitors. Until I'm self-sufficient, I won't afford to be with the man I love. And I'll look for a husband so that it's interesting to be together. And if I don't find one, I'll be fine on my own." "Girls, are we having tea?" Louis appeared in the doorway. Later that evening, Pat lay on her bed in her apartment. The light from the courtyard lantern shone through the curtain, casting whimsical reflections on the walls. "Is everything Brooke said really true?" thought the woman, tormented by insomnia. "I thought Louis flirted with everyone like that it was just his behaviour. I didn't even suspect he might have feelings for me. And we've only seen each other a couple of times. How can it be like this? But I can feel my heart racing when I look at him or catch his eye. I've never felt like this before, not even when I fell in love with Dennis. What is it? Is it just hormones, or is this what true love feels like? He didn't abandon his daughter after divorce and supports her in every way. And in general, Louis is a very interesting man. For some reason, I believe Brooke, and my intuition. It's not a facade. Such decent people exist. Maybe I should try to get to know him better. No, I won't impose, but I could experiment. He's going to teach me to handle the yacht, right? So we'll get to know each other, and then we'll see what happens." Pat didn't notice how she fell asleep. In the morning, it rained heavily. Louis said there was nothing to do at the port and invited Pat to visit him. The woman agreed. By evening, she took a cab to Louis's house. The man greeted her with a wide smile. "Wow, a piece of summer in the harsh sea autumn," Louis said admiringly and kissed Pat on the cheek. "And I've prepared dinner for us. I hope you eat steaks." "It smells wonderful," the woman smiled. "Louis, She didn't have time to finish. The man hugged her tightly and kissed her. The world spun around Pat, and she realized that from that moment she finally began to live.